Winter came early to the Ardennes, and when it arrived, it brought more than snow. It brought paralysis, roads vanished under ice, radios failed. Units that had advanced confidently days earlier were suddenly isolated, pinned in forests and villages with no clear way out. Reports moved up the chain of command faster than solutions. Each message carried the same implication: American soldiers were running out of time. At 3rd Army Headquarters, George S. Patton understood the situation immediately. He did not need dramatic intelligence summaries or optimistic forecasts. The facts were sufficient. Entire formations were at risk of being destroyed or captured. Supplies could not reach them. Weather would not improve. And yet, the orders from above were unmistakable. Hold position. Consolidate. Do not move. At Supreme Headquarters, Dwight Eisenhower faced pressures that had nothing to do with snow or fuel. The Allied command structure was under strain. British and American staffs were arguing over authority, responsibility, and blame. Bernard Montgomery was asserting control over American units in the North, presenting himself as the stabilizing force. Political leaders in London and Washington demanded reassurance. Every decision Eisenhower made had consequences beyond the battlefield. Patton knew this. He also knew something else. If he followed the orders exactly as written, men under his command would not survive the week. The maps made that clear. The weather made it inevitable. The silence from surrounded units made it unbearable. He was cornered. Eisenhower was cornered. The alliance itself was cornered. Someone would lose power. Someone would lose trust. And somewhere in the Ardennes, thousands of soldiers would pay the price. Patton did not announce a decision. He did not argue publicly. He waited, measured, and watched the hours pass. Each delay narrowed the margin for action. Each update from the front removed another option. The choice had not yet been made, but it was coming. And when it came, there would be no way to undo it. The stakes were larger than a single relief operation. The Allied war effort rested on the assumption that unity could be maintained under pressure. That assumption was already fragile. American and British commanders had different doctrines, different political expectations, and different tolerances for risk. What held them together was Eisenhower's authority and the belief that orders would be obeyed. If Patton disobeyed, that belief would fracture. Other generals would notice, so would politicians. The question would no longer be whether Patton was right, but whether the chain of command still functioned. In a coalition war, perception mattered as much as performance. Resignation was not a theoretical possibility. Several senior officers had already hinted that continued interference or perceived favoritism could make their positions untenable. Public confidence, especially in Britain, was sensitive. Montgomery supporters framed American setbacks as proof that British leadership was required. American commanders saw this as an encroachment on their authority. The disagreement was not tactical, it was existential. Normal solutions did not apply. Eisenhower could not simply overrule Montgomery without political fallout. He could not endorse Patton's aggressiveness without encouraging insubordination. Delay was not neutral. Delay meant loss. Every standard mechanism of command failed under the weight of competing pressures. This was no longer about pride. It was about whether the Allied command could survive a moment when military logic and political survival pointed in opposite directions. Patton's history made this moment inevitable. He had always moved faster than the system preferred. In North Africa and Sicily, his speed embarrassed allies and unsettled superiors. His successes were undeniable, but so were the problems they caused. Each incident had ended with compromise rather than resolution. Each time, the underlying tension remained. Eisenhower had protected Patton more than once, believing that aggression had its place. But protection had limits. Every accommodation increased the risk that Patton would push again. Montgomery never forgot these episodes. To him, Patton represented chaos disguised as brilliance. By late 1944, these unresolved resentments sat just beneath the surface. The Ardennes did not create them, it exposed them. When the German offensive erupted, the command system reverted to instinct. Montgomery centralized control. Eisenhower sought balance. Patton looked at the map and saw only movement or death. The trigger was not a speech or a confrontation. It was an order, clear, restrictive, unyielding. Patton received it and understood immediately what it meant. It meant waiting. It meant restraint. It meant accepting losses in the hope that larger plans would hold. For Patton, that crossed a line. Not because he rejected authority, but because the order violated his understanding of command responsibility. He believed a commander existed to act when action was required, regardless of inconvenience. This belief had guided his career. It had also nearly ended it more than once. Reactions were immediate, but muted. Staff officers recognized the shift in tempo. Units were repositioned with urgency. Supply routes were reassessed. No one said the word disobedience. They did not need to. The atmosphere carried it. At higher levels, shockwave spread quietly. British liaison officers took notes. American generals exchanged guarded messages. Eisenhower was informed that Patton was moving. The reports did not accuse, they stated facts. Facts that forced a reckoning. Pressure closed in from all sides. Montgomery's camp saw confirmation of their fears. American commanders worried about precedent. Political advisors warned of press fallout if the operation failed. Private conversations grew tense. Voices lowered, trust thinned. There were no good options left. If Eisenhower stopped Patton, he would be seen as sacrificing men for protocol. If he endorsed him, he would undermine the very authority holding the alliance together. Silence became its own decision. Patton, meanwhile, advanced. Roads were cleared. Relief columns reached surrounded units. Supplies arrived where none were expected. Men who had prepared for capture or death resumed fighting. The operation worked. Militarily, it was correct. Politically, it was disastrous. Patton could not do both. He could not save the men and preserve unquestioned obedience. One choice would end the illusion of perfect unity. The other would break the army in the field. He chose the army. The compromise that followed was deliberately ambiguous. Patton was neither punished nor praised. The operation was acknowledged without celebration. The message was clear. The crisis had been resolved, but the behavior would not be encouraged. No one was satisfied. Montgomery felt undermined. Eisenhower felt exposed. Patton felt justified, but isolated. The alliance moved forward, but something fundamental had shifted. In the aftermath, power subtly realigned. Patton retained command, but lost trust at the highest levels. Montgomery gained influence, but hardened divisions. Eisenhower learned that control in a coalition is always provisional. No forgiveness followed, only adjustment. Long-term consequences were quieter but permanent. Commanders became more cautious in framing orders. Initiative was both encouraged and feared. Patton's reputation solidified into something paradoxical, indispensable, and dangerous. History would later simplify the episode. A bold general saved trapped troops, unnecessary risk paid off. But those who lived through it remembered something else. They remembered the silence after the decision, the realization that unity had limits. That trust, once strained, never fully returns. The real lesson was not about defiance or bravery, it was about leadership under constraint. About how alliances survive not through harmony, but through managed tension. About how power is exercised not only through orders, but through the willingness to absorb consequences. The war was won, the men were saved, but the idea that command could remain intact under all pressures was quietly lost in the snow of the Ardennes. Patton's decision did not emerge suddenly. It was the product of a career spent colliding with systems designed to restrain him. Long before the Ardennes, he had learned that speed created enemies as surely as it created victories. Every rapid advance embarrassed someone. Every independent success weakened another man's claim to authority. Those resentments never disappeared, they accumulated. Eisenhower understood this pattern better than anyone. He valued Patton precisely because others feared him, yet that value came with constant risk. Eisenhower's command rested on balance, compromise, and trust between nations that did not fully trust one another. Patton disrupted balance by existing. His presence forced decisions that could not be postponed. Montgomery, by contrast, built power slowly and visibly. He believed order created victory, not momentum. To him, Patton's methods were not merely dangerous, they were destabilizing. Each time Patton succeeded independently, it weakened the argument that centralized control was essential. That argument was the foundation of Montgomery's influence. The Ardennes exposed how fragile those foundations were. As German forces advanced, Montgomery pressed for expanded authority over American units. He framed his request as necessity, not ambition. Eisenhower recognized the political logic. British confidence needed reassurance, American forces needed coordination. Yet granting authority came at a price. American commanders would see it as surrender. Patton watched this unfold from a distance, unmoved by the politics but deeply affected by the consequences. While command structures debated jurisdiction, men froze in foxholes. While authority shifted on paper, ammunition ran low. The contrast hardened his resolve. The pressure escalated quietly. There were no public confrontations. Only private warnings, subtle reminders of hierarchy. Carefully worded messages emphasizing restraint. Patton listened. He always listened. He simply did not comply when compliance meant paralysis. When his columns advanced, the action was framed as operational necessity. That framing was deliberate. It allowed Eisenhower space to maneuver. It gave political leaders ambiguity. It denied Montgomery a clear target. Yet ambiguity did not eliminate resentment. It deepened it. Behind closed doors, reaction sharpened. British officers questioned American discipline. American generals questioned British motives. Eisenhower absorbed criticism from both sides. He could not defend Patton openly without endorsing defiance. He could not condemn him without acknowledging failure. The alliance held, but only because everyone understood the alternative. Collapse was not dramatic, it was procedural. Resignations, reassignments, public disputes. None of it would help defeat Germany. That reality enforced restraint more effectively than loyalty ever could. Patton sensed the shift. He was not naive. He knew success would not redeem him. It would merely postpone consequences. His relationship with Eisenhower cooled. Communication narrowed. Approval became conditional. In the field, soldiers saw only results. They did not know the cost. They did not see trust erode in headquarters far from the front. They did not hear the words left unsaid in meetings where commanders recalibrated their expectations of one another. The crisis passed, but its residue remained. Every subsequent operation carried an unspoken memory. Initiative would be tolerated, but watched. Authority would be asserted, but cautiously. Patton remained effective, but isolated. The impossible choice had been made. The price was ongoing. Eisenhower emerged with authority intact, but altered. He learned that coalition command was not about enforcing obedience, but managing inevitability. Strong personalities could not be neutralized. They could only be contained. Patton could never be fully contained. Montgomery retained influence, but lost something less visible. Moral high ground is fragile. Once questioned, it never fully recovers. His insistence on control now carried suspicion. Patton continued forward, as he always had, but the space around him narrowed. He was trusted to fight, not to decide. That distinction mattered. The war moved toward its conclusion shaped by these adjustments. Orders became more precise. Flexibility was bounded. Commanders anticipated friction before it appeared. The Ardennes had taught them that unity could fracture without warning. History would later frame Patton's action as inevitable. It was not. It was contingent. It depended on weather, timing, personality, and the limits of patience. Another man might have obeyed. Another alliance might have broken. What endured was the lesson that alliances fail quietly. Not through open rebellion, but through accumulated doubt. Not through betrayal, but through necessity. Patton saved his men. In doing so, he revealed the cost of decisive leadership inside a fragile system. Power shifted, trust diminished, and command was never quite the same again. The next decision would come easier. The consequences would be anticipated. The innocence of belief in seamless cooperation was gone. That loss would shape the remainder of the war more than any single movement of troops. The final phase unfolded without ceremony. No announcement marked the shift. No document recorded the moment trust recalibrated itself. It happened in tone, in restraint, in the narrowing space between what was said and what was meant. The crisis had passed, but its imprint remained. Patton continued to command aggressively, but under closer scrutiny. Every movement was reported with greater precision. Every initiative was weighed, not only for military effect, but for political implication. The freedom he once exercised instinctively now required justification. Success no longer insulated him from suspicion. Eisenhower adjusted quietly. He refined how orders were written, leaving less room for interpretation. Flexibility was embedded, but bounded. The lesson was clear. Authority in a coalition could not rely on trust alone. It required structure resilient enough to absorb personalities like Patton without fracturing. Montgomery, too, adapted. His influence remained significant, but his approach hardened. Where he once framed control as coordination, he now emphasized discipline. The Ardennes had shown him that initiative could undermine hierarchy faster than defeat. He would not allow that lesson to be forgotten. No one spoke openly about resentment. That would have forced confrontation. Instead, it settled into habits. Meetings shortened, communication formalized. Decisions rooted through additional layers. These were not punishments, they were safeguards. The men in the field noticed none of this. They advanced, fought, and endured as the war pushed eastward. For them, Patton remained the commander who arrived when others hesitated. That image endured because it was simple. The truth was not. In private, senior officers reflected on what had nearly happened. Had Patton been stopped, entire units might have been lost. Had he been openly endorsed, the command structure might have unraveled. The outcome rested on ambiguity. That ambiguity became policy. Reputations crystallized. Patton was remembered as brilliant, but uncontrollable. Eisenhower as steady, but constrained. Montgomery as methodical, but inflexible. None of these assessments were complete. All of them endured. The long-term consequences extended beyond personalities. Allied strategy became more cautious about decentralization. Initiative was encouraged, but only within clearer limits. The war demanded speed, but also cohesion. Balancing the two became a defining challenge. Patton's later operations reflected this balance. He advanced rapidly, but within narrower corridors of approval. His instincts remained unchanged. The environment around him did not. He adapted because he had to, not because he wanted to. History would later celebrate outcomes. The Ardennes counteroffensive succeeded. German momentum was broken. The road to victory reopened. These facts were undeniable. What was less visible was how close the alliance had come to internal fracture. The episode reshaped how command was understood. Orders were no longer assumed to be absolute, nor was disobedience romanticized. Instead, leadership was seen as negotiation under pressure. Between necessity and legitimacy, between results and restraint. Patton never apologized. He did not believe he needed to. Eisenhower never publicly rebuked him. He believed that would do more harm than good. Montgomery never forgave him. He did not believe forgiveness was required. Each man carried forward his own interpretation. The war allowed no time to reconcile them. When victory finally came, these tensions did not disappear. They were buried beneath celebration and relief. But among those who had commanded, memory lingered. They remembered the winter when obedience and survival diverged. The real lesson was not about defiance. It was about limits, the limits of authority. The limits of trust, the limits of systems designed to manage extraordinary individuals in extraordinary circumstances. Patton ignored orders to save his men. That statement is true. It is also incomplete. He ignored orders because the system that produced those orders could not reconcile politics with reality quickly enough. He acted because delay was a decision, and delay meant loss. The alliance survived because it absorbed the shock without forcing resolution. That survival came at a cost. Trust became conditional. Authority became procedural. Cooperation became calculated. These were not failures, they were adaptations. But they marked the end of something simpler. The war was won through unity, but not harmony. Through cooperation, but not consensus. Through leaders who understood that sometimes the most dangerous moment is not when the enemy attacks, but when allies disagree on how to respond. Patton's choice forced that understanding into the open. It saved lives, it strained relationships. It reshaped command. The men marched on. The war moved forward. Victory came. But the belief that obedience and morality always align was left behind in the snow, alongside the tracks of tanks that moved without permission and could not have waited.